Hey guys, we're back with another tutorial video for Pit Lane 16. Now this is where the real fun starts, the actual events. So each weekend is made up of 3 events. There's the practice round, the qualifying round, and the actual race. So obviously the first thing we're going to explain here is the practice round. So as you can see, the cars have already started going, looking to test their setups, their tires, the abrasiveness of the track to get the best setup for the actual race weekend. As you can see on the top left, there's the flag of the country in which the race is taking place that weekend. There's the event, so practice, and the length of time for the practice round, for the qualifying round, or for the race. As you can see also, which is really cool, the background here, you see some trees and some fields. This actually changes depending on where the race is held. So every country will have a different background for the race. But let's get started. So as you can see, there's telemetry here. What this does is it shows you how damaged your car is. So as you can see, obviously it's practice round, we just started, everything's okay, the car is green. And it goes from green to yellow to red, red being the most damaged, and you have to get your car into pit stop right away. What happens is that the car is made up of 2, let's say, sections. There's the external parts and the internal parts. Now, the external parts can only be damaged when you're overtaking a car and therefore come into contact with it. The internal parts, however, are damaged just by simple malfunctions during the race. So while the car is moving, and obviously when it's not in the pit stop, that's when the internal malfunctions happen. Now, of course, the more damaged your car is, as I said previously, it goes from green, meaning there's hardly any damage, if any at all, to yellow, which means there's been some damage, to red, which means there's severe damage. The more damaged your car is, the longer the pit stop is going to be. One last thing about accidents and malfunctions is the frequency with which they happen. So for instance, the better your driver is, the less chance that you will get into an accident and that your car will be damaged. For the malfunctions or the internal parts of the car, depends on how good the part of the car actually is. So from the upgrades that you've been doing before each weekend event, the better the part is, the more upgraded the part is, the less chance of a malfunction. So on the right here, you can see there's the classification table where during the practice round, it gives you the best lap times of the drivers. So on the left here, you could see the position, you could see the teams, you could see the name of the drivers, their best lap time, and of course what type of tire they used. So S for soft tire, H for hard tire. If you click on the arrow up here on the top right, it gives you a basic rundown of each driver's lap times. So not their best times, but all of them. Obviously from there you could see their best ones and what type of tires they used. Then, what you can see here on the bottom, perfect timing actually, we see that Bogdanov had a driver error. Now, in this little box down here, you will see not only driver errors, but you will also see accidents, and you will see malfunctions. So as we were talking about previously, the telemetry will show you exactly how much damage is done. These little messages up here, or down here rather, show you the, first of all, the gravity of the damage. Under the classification table, we can see there's 2 panels, one for each driver. Before we get into details, I'm just going to give you a quick rundown of what the buttons, what the bars mean. So the green bar here is for your tires. The dark green meaning hard tires, light green meaning soft tires, and the bar itself goes from green to red depending on how worn out the tires are. You see there's little numbers here, or number and letter, which is 0L, 0L. That indicates the number of laps that set of tires has done. The engine bar goes from blue to yellow, yellow indicating that it's getting worn out. And then you have the set of buttons at the bottom. So if I click on go, what that does is send the car into the track. Obviously then after you could click on pit, which will have it enter the pit stop. I can also click on pit stop, and if I change my mind, I can click on stay out, which will have them not enter a pit stop and continue the track. Once they're in the pit stop, you can also change the set of tires. So as you can see here, driver number 2, you can change from hard to soft. And then there's the power button, which indicates how much horsepower in the engine, and the push button, which indicates to the driver to go faster or slower. And lastly, there's the setup button, which changes the setup of your car. So now let's start talking about the details. Let's start with the tires. Now, each track in this game has a different abrasiveness level. And not only each track, but each season that you play. So for instance, while this track this season might have a certain abrasiveness, the very next season, the very same track will have a different one. What that means is that the wear on your tires is going to be different for each track and each season. Obviously, the more abrasive a track is, the faster it's going to wear down your tires. Now, there are 2 types of tires you can have. You can either have soft tires or you can have hard tires. And as I said, that's indicated by the green bar. As you can see right here, it changes colors. So the light green is soft, dark green is hard. The soft tires perform better. So you'll drive faster with soft tires, but they'll get worn out faster. Well, faster than the hard tires. While the hard tires will resist longer, but you'll drive more slowly. So this is where you have to make the sacrifice on what you want. Do you want duration or do you want speed? And you have to find the right balance for each track. So you have to understand each track as its own track, basically, because as I said, each one changes in levels of abrasiveness. So while this track, the soft tires might only last, let's say, 5 laps, the next track, soft tires might last 10 laps. And the same goes for hard tires. So you have to always play around with the different types of tires on the different tracks. So now, related with the tires is the push button. As I told you before, what the push button does is it tells your driver how fast to go. So it ranges from 1 and goes all the way to 5. 1 obviously being the slowest, 5 being the fastest. Now, related to the tires, obviously if you tell your driver to go slower, the tires will last longer because you're not going fast. The faster you go, the faster your tires wear out. So that's another thing that you have to understand in the practice round, is how fast you can go and how many laps a set of tires are able to make before they get worn out. And another thing is, this is where strategy comes in, because obviously if you just put on a fresh set of tires and you just came out of the pit stop and you need to make up some time, you need to overtake someone, even if you're, first and second in a fight, you could push your tires more. So obviously you'll push 5 and push because you only have a few laps left and you already know that your tires aren't going to get worn out before the end of the race. Another strategy obviously is the opposite. If you need to hold the position and obviously not wear out your tires, then you put your push at a lower level. One last thing to remember about the tires is that once they start getting worn, you will start losing speed. And it's not a lot of speed, but obviously the more worn your tires are, the slower you will go. So now the engine, which I've already told you guys is the blue bar right over here. And it goes from blue to yellow depending on how worn out it is. Now, a major difference between the tires and the engine is that you can have as many, or rather you could use as many sets of tires as you want. The engine, however, you only have one for 3 events for each weekend. So that means that during your practice round, during your qualifying round, and during the actual race, you have to use the same engine. So you have to be very careful with how much you use it, how hard you push it. Because if you consume half your engine's power in just the practice round, that means you only have half your engine left to use for the qualifying round and for the race. Now the power button that you see here is correlated to the engine. It goes from 1 to 5, just like the push button, but it relates to the horsepower of the engine. So obviously you have it at power 1, you will use less of your engine, but you will also be going slower. Power 5, you'll be going a lot faster, but your engine will wear out more quickly. 3 obviously is the normal level. A really important thing to remember about the engine is because you only have one, once it gets really worn out, you will lose speed, but not only lose a little bit of speed, your car will be noticeably slower. So that's why you really have to be careful and take care of your engine during the practice round and the qualifying round. Last but not least about the practice round is the setup of your car. Now, the setup, as you can see here, can only be changed once your car is in the pit stop and only during practice rounds. So that's very important to remember, only during practice rounds. The setups of the car go from 1 to 7, as you can see here, and they're the same for both drivers. So for setup 1 will be the same setup 1 for driver 1 as well. But you have to change them for each driver. So if I switch setup 2 for driver 2, does not mean that driver 1 will automatically be using setup 2. It's just that the configuration is the same. Now setups change from track to track and from season to season. So just because setup 3, for example, is the best for this track, does not mean that setup 3 will be the best for the next track, and it does not mean that setup 3 for this track next season will also be the best. So the best thing to do is to try them all, to figure out, obviously by checking your lap times, which setup works best for you. So you already know now which setup is the best. After a certain amount of laps, and this number is generated randomly from track to track, you have the chance, as I said, to upgrade either the setup, so giving your car more performance, or to upgrade the reliability of the car, which means less malfunctions during the actual race. Because you can do this as many times as you want during the practice, well, as many times as you want according to the number of laps you have to do, but only during the practice, because remember, you can only change the setup of the car during the practice round. So the faster you figure out which setup is best, the more times you'll be able to upgrade it.